Oh. Ah. Will destroy them. Nazi. Nice. You're not late. I mean, you're like 30 seconds late. Rodriguez is on time. On time. Oh, I almost destroyed those dogs several times down there. Driving me crazy. A little bit crazy. That's okay, though. I just want to read the Apocrypha only right now. I guess not. I was looking through some stuff you and Ghost were talking about, Rodriguez. I saw you printed the some of the lost writings, which is good stuff. Ghost Pastora. But I was looking through a couple of the other apocryphal texts, and it's just good stuff, you know. Let's just turn into an apocrypha only group. Let's just do that. That's all we'll read. There's just so much of it. There's so much of it. Maybe Thursday for a while will just be the Apocrypha. And then eventually we'll switch back to the New Testament. And as long as we keep the order while bouncing back and forth, I don't care. It's so good, though. Apocrypha only sounds good. It's good stuff. I'm very, very open to Thursday just continuing on. Do the second book of Adam and Eve, and then maybe move into some of the secrets of Enoch or Solomon. I know there were a few that I can't remember who put them in Discord, but there's a good one like Maccabees is good. There's some good stuff, so maybe we'll just do that. Maybe we'll do that for a while. We got scammed. I'm telling you, this is what I've been screaming for a very long time. The Christians have been scammed, man. Been shut into a very small box for a very long time, and it's wild to me. Never understood it. But we'll read it. We'll get through all of it at some point, you know. But it's just so interesting. It's so different, but also has so many similarities. You guys are so sweet. You guys are so sweet. All right. So good stuff tonight, though. This is exciting, normal canon stuff. At least you get into some of the fun stuff in Genesis. Yeah, Abraham and the covenant and circumcision. So we get the transformation of Abram, which is good, I guess. It's like it's a significant moment in time and in the actual covenant as well. How are we scammed? Abby, I would say you should come to hang out in Discord with us or go to YouTube right now. On YouTube, it's at live Bible study on YouTube, not TikTok, on YouTube. And join the chat over there, and I guarantee somebody will fill you in on how we've been scammed. From there also, you'll see a link to the Discord that is free, and you should join that and talk to us there too. Because that sounds pretty bad with no context. We all read the Bible. That's what we're doing tonight. And it's what we do. I'm there right now. Yeah, so if you go to YouTube, you have to type it exactly at Live Bible Study, because it's a new channel because our other one had some issues with YouTube. If you type it exactly like I typed it to you into YouTube, you'll find us live right now. There are people over there in the chat who I am very confident will fill you in, and then come to Discord. And then we do this Thursday night at 7 p.m. Central Time, and we do it Sunday night at 6 p.m. Central Time, which is right now. We're reading the Apocrypha on Thursday, and we're reading right now Genesis on Sunday. Okay, before I go, scammed about what? Like what topic? Scammed about the Bible in general. Meaning the Bible that was read early on in Christianity is not the Bible that you have in your hand. That's not to say the Bible you have in your hand is wrong or lies or anything like that, because I don't believe that it is. But there were many things that were removed, and they don't lie about it. They'll tell you. Like scholarship will tell you. My whole history is in the academic side of Christianity, and I wasted a lot of years learning that side. But they're not shy about it. It's just something that like the normal church in your neighborhood just will never talk about. Abby says, "Oh, true." Well, if you believe that, check it out. Check out the Discord. It's free. There's really good people on there, and like I said, we do this twice a week. Yeah, we've read a ton of the book of Enoch. And Esther we haven't done yet, but it's on the list. So if you're into that kind of stuff, I'll just say you should come hang out with us and go to YouTube, because that's where everybody's at. TikTok is just open kind of in the background. Okay, well, I hope to see you over there. You sound very smart. You sound like you would fit in with our little circle we got going on here. All right, so 17 out of Genesis. Abraham, not Abram, because we are shifting. What do you want to know, Rodriguez? Scammed as in deliberately hidden context. Yeah, one of many things, in my opinion, in the conversation of scamming. But deliberately hidden context is definitely a big one. Why'd they do us dirty like that? I think they did us dirty like that. I think there are a lot of innocent reasons for it, truly, where just like power, pride, control. I think those are heavily present, and they have a massive degree of influence in why they did it. But I also think like things we're trying to hide. There's Abby. Everybody meet Abby. She just came from TikTok. She sounds very smart. Very glad she's here. But beyond like the normal human characteristics of like pride and greed and control and things like that, like we all know in Christian history, a lot of things shifted around governments. It's also not a hidden thing. It's something that's very much written about throughout history. Like it's very obvious. But I think besides all that, when you get into kind of the deeper rabbit hole side of it, is I think they were deliberately trying to hide things, deliberately trying to make you not understand certain things. I believe that. And it's a very big rabbit hole that we touch on pretty frequently, but like in little, bites here and there. How is he reading both comments on TikTok? So TikTok has a desktop thing now. So I have OBS open and then I have TikTok open. And I'm super tech savvy, which is a joke because I'm not. But I can have both the chats there. I figure out enough to like get by, but that's about as far as it goes. All right, Abraham and the covenant of circumcision. Good stuff. Lots happens here. When Abram was 99 years old, remember that like every time his age is talked about, something significant is going to happen. So when Abram, aka Abraham, is or about to be Abraham, whenever his age is given to you, something significant is also about to be given to you. So we're going to see that in a second. So he's 99 years old. The Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, "I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless, that I make my covenant between me and you and may multiply you greatly." One thing here I guess first thing here is Lord appeared. We've been talking about this a lot throughout Genesis. Is this, let me get the music out of my ear because it makes me want to lose my mind. All right. This appearing of the Lord, whereas like depending on the context and depending on the way that it's written in Hebrew, sometimes it seems as though the author's trying to say he was literally in the presence of him, and sometimes not so much. Sometimes in more of a distant manner. This, and you'll see why in a minute, is literal, or at least it's written that way. Because then when you get to, quote, I am God Almighty, walk before me and be blameless, that I may make my covenant between me and you and may multiply you greatly. I want to read this from Logos in reference to the God Almighty. El Shaddai, the Hebrew phrase used here, El Shaddai, which is commonly translated to God Almighty or the Almighty God, is translated as such based on English translation tradition. However, this is not based on the original Hebrew, but how the Septuagint, the Greek side, the old Greek translation of the Old Testament, how the Septuagint translates Shaddai in the book of Job. Meaning we have another good example of a translation that is not accurate, and we keep it anyways. Just another small little puzzle piece as to why, to a degree, you're scammed kind of the whole way through. Why? Why? Because they chose to translate it in Greek for the Septuagint in another book. They used it here as well, even though it does not appear in most of the actual scriptures. Walk before me and be blameless. In Hebrew, this term blameless is without flaw or without defect is like the way, is a better way of translating it. That without defect. Blameless kind of has a different connotation to it, or at least it can contextually. In context, defect, lacking a defect is what is actually being said. That I may make my covenant between you and me, and you may multiply greatly. Now, when he says that I may make my covenant between me and you, this is the covenant that was talked about several times now, but I believe originally was in 15. And it's, so here, he's not bringing in a new covenant. It's a confirmation of a pre-existing covenant, that which was brought into place in chapter 15. Then Abram fell on his face, and God said to him, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. I want to read this from Logos too. So for Abram, the name Abram in Hebrew may be related to the names Abiram or Abaram, known for Akkadian texts contemporary with Abraham. The first syllable, the Av, is the Hebrew word for father. The second syllable, Ram, likely derived from the Hebrew verb ram, meaning to be raised or to be exalted. This means, the name means exalted father, or the father is exalted. Then he moves from Abram, per God's divine intervention here, into Abraham. Logos has this for that. The new name Abraham in Hebrew is related to Abram's role as father of many nations, or father of a multitude of nations, which is the covenant. The first part of this phrase, Av Hamon, seems to be a wordplay in Hebrew on Abraham's new name. It is difficult to discern the actual derivation of the Hebrew name that we have here, meaning the actual full depth of understanding is limited. For I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make you into nations. He's confirming this in several different ways. This part is different, though, when he says, and kings shall come from you. That was not a part of the original covenant. So this is an addition. Not to say it was added, like unnecessarily or something, but if you read it as it is, and you believe nothing was altered about this, which I don't believe there's really any reason to believe that there was, it just means that either something changed, something was left out, or God has just decided to add something. There has been an addition of some kind. It doesn't drastically change anything. It's just something to be aware of. So this, and kings shall come from you, is an addition. It's something new from the covenant we already know from 15 that this is actually referencing. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant that will be repeated everlasting. The point will be driven home throughout 17 and I think parts of 18 too. To be God to you and to your offspring after you. And I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land of your sojourning, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession. Everlasting again. And I will be their God. Everlasting, everlasting. 9. And God said to Abraham, now Abraham, as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you, throughout their generations. Another way to say that would be everlasting. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Repeat, 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 repeat. The Bible always repeatedly says things that it really wants you to understand. Every male among you shall be circumcised. It was also just something that they did in Hebrew a lot too. That part again. Every male among you shall be circumcised. We're going to talk about circumcision a little bit tonight and some other stuff. So it stays fair between men and women. You shall be circumcised in the flesh. Well, let me finish actually. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. The reason that is written like that, most likely, is because other points in other literature, because circumcision is not specific to Israel, it's not specific to the Bible. Circumcision was, you can read about it in other Near Ancient Eastern literature as well. Which I think is a misconception from what I understand. I think a lot of people think it was like a Jewish thing. It was, but it was also an Egyptian thing. And several other cultures also engaged in circumcision. We know this from literature. We know this from art. There are several ways that like we can be very confident of that. But the reason that it's written like this, you shall be circumcised in the flesh, is because in other literature outside of the Bible and in other sections of the Bible, circumcision is talked about in a non-literal physical way. You have like circumcision of the heart and other body parts, like of the ears and of the lips, that are not literal. There's no actual circumcision of those body parts. It's the circumcision of a speech, in a sense, or the circumcision of your ears out of Jeremiah has a non-literal context to it. So that specifies here that he's talking about a literal circumcision of the foreskin. Very specific. Very specific. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised. 8 days old. Every male throughout your generations, whether born in your house or bought with your money from any foreigner who is not of your offspring, both he who is born, Both he who is born in your house and he who is bought with your money shall surely be circumcised. So he's trying to toss a blanket over the whole concept. So shall my covenant be in your flesh, an everlasting covenant. There it is again, everlasting. Any uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. This is one of those things too that like isn't talked about a lot. The whole issue of circumcision, because our context for the most part is like a New Testament context, the new covenant context, where circumcision, you could argue, is not a requirement. But it's not to be ignored that the entire basis of the Christian faith is the Jewish faith. The entire basis of everything we have in Christianity is this. So this is still something you have to deal with. You got to get over any discomfort. This was a massive part of the covenant that he made with Abraham, to the point that people will be cut off from the group should they not engage in circumcision within the parameters that God sets here. Because, quote, he has broken my covenant. Instinctually, this could be totally wrong, Go says. Could Abram be father of the household and Abraham be father of many nations? I want to look into it further. As if they're two people or two personalities pre and post covenant. I agree with Rodriguez, though. It's an interesting thought. Yeah. And like Rodriguez says, I think then it would be interesting to think about Sarah and her complex. Physical laws correlate to spiritual laws. Circumcision is no different. Does circumcision not just mean self-control? Two functions. Okay. So wait, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but do you think circumcision was not a literal physical thing that they did? I'm gonna read it again. Go said physical laws correlates to spiritual laws. Circumcision is no different. Does circumcision not just mean self-control? Yeah, I need you to explain that more. But I'm curious. It means cleanliness. Not really. I mean, in a sense, for sure. But circumcision, physical, literal, I don't believe that's all that it was. I don't believe that's why God made that covenant. It doesn't really make sense in the greater context of the covenant. It's like a benefit of it, I suppose, or maybe even a partial purpose for it, but I'm not sure. Thank you. Yeah, I'll turn the mic on right now. All right, the stage is open, or it should be at least. Circumcision of the heart in New Testament, right? The heart, the lips, the ears. Those are the only ones that I can think of off the top of my head. It does go circumcision has a spiritual aspect to it. Oh, if that's what you meant, for sure. For sure. Yeah, it was physical to teach a spiritual. Okay, I gotcha. Yes, I totally agree. Yeah, it's like I think of it kind of like baptism. Baptism, it's this physical, actual thing that happens in the physical reality that is, in a sense, kind of meaningless, but it represents something that has actual meaning and purpose. It represents something that is a spiritual thing. Rodriguez, you should be good. I think you have to accept the invite now. There you go.
Sorry, my bad.
No, you're good. Did you have, or were you just getting ready?
I think I'm okay right now.
Okay.
You need to say something?
Yeah.
No, I'm trying to remember what I was taught specifically on circumcision. So I'll look it up and maybe we can circle back to it, I guess.
For sure. Scott, did we start at 6? For some reason, I thought we were starting at 7. What did I miss? Sundays always... Did I mess this up first before I... Sunday's always 6, right? Thursday's 7. Last week, Thursday, though, I had to reschedule, and then I jacked up the times on Friday. So maybe that is what has you confused. But Sundays are always 6 p.m. Central Time. Thursdays are always 7 p.m. Central Time. And I believe they're right in Discord. If they're not, definitely let me know. And it should translate to like your, whatever your time zone is. Okay, so circumcision, blah, blah, blah. You break the covenant, bad stuff. You get cut off from your people. Not great things. Isaac's birth promised. And God said to Abraham, as for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall now be her name. I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. That's important. Why did it just shoot me back up? Okay. I will give you a son by her. This was the promise, right? And then we had all of this drama with the Egyptian, call her a servant, whatever you want to call her, a house girl, where Sarai and Abram had this contention over the having of the child. And so the Egyptian house girl kind of stepped in, and then there was a bunch of drama between the two women, and one of them ran away. Got the side chick. And then Sarah got her feelings hurt, and they had to bring her back. It was this whole big dramatic thing. And then they had the kid, but the kid was not it. The kid was not the covenant. And so there was even more drama of like, okay, well, how does the covenant get fulfilled? Blah, blah, blah. This is where all of this comes to fruition. So I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall become nations, which just means producing children. Kings of people shall come for her. The king's aspect, again, here also is an addition from the previous, or not the previous, from the previous expression of the covenant. The kings is a new thing. It's an added part to this. So kings of people shall come from her. Then Abram fell on his face and laughed and said to himself, shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old, because he is 99 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? Abraham now is literally laughing at God, in a sense. In a sense. And Abraham said to God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." And God said, "No, but Sarah your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac." Now enters Isaac of the Old Testament. "I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him and will make him fruitful and multiply him greatly." So Abraham is kind of like, well, shit, I already have this kid. What about Ishmael? Like, what comes of him? He's to some degree is concerned. And God's like, no, as for Ishmael, I heard you. I hear you. I feel you. I got you. Behold, I have blessed him and will make him fruitful and multiply him greatly. So Ishmael is good. He's just not the guy. He's not the covenantal guy, but he's good. All will be well.
Does anyone know? Yeah, so this is the first documented baby mama drama.
Yeah. Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's still going on today. That's so sad. But there's a holiday I know that's celebrated in Islam where I think they say Isaac was not the sacrifice, that it was Ishmael. So they celebrate a holiday, but I'm trying to remember
Eid
exactly what
al-Adha.
No.
Many Muslims celebrate to commemorate both the devotion of Abraham and the survival of his son Ishmael. The story is known as the Akedah in Judaism, binding of Isaac, and originates in the Torah in the first book of Moses, Genesis chapter 22.
Right, but for them, was it Isaac or was it Ishmael?
Well, Ishmael was their guy.
Okay, so this
Yeah.
is where things start getting different.
If Ghost knows more than me about Islam. So if I know Ishmael is like a fundamental key player for them. I don't know like when contrasted to Isaac though. So maybe Ghost can throw in there if he knows that.
Okay, and then do you know where we're at timeline wise in here?
What do you mean?
Whoops, sorry, never mind. Wrong question. My bad.
Okay.
Keep going.
Okay. All right. So as for Ishmael, Ishmael's good. He shall father 12 princes. 12 princes. Some people will make a connection to like the 12 tribes, which is maybe relevant. Maybe. I mean, it's relevant to some degree, but there is an added there is relevance added by some groups of people on the numerology aspect of it. It's not my thing, you know that. But if you care, it's something to look into. "And I will make him into a great nation, but I will establish my covenant with Isaac." Isaac being the guy, he's the covenant guy, "whom Sarah shall bear to you at this time next year." So now they have a timeline too. Whereas before, when God said this stuff to them, they were already old and they already kind of thought it was a joke and didn't understand how this was all going to happen. And then they had what Rodriguez called the baby mama drama, where they seem like, okay, this must be it. It's happening. It wasn't exactly what we thought, but I guess it makes more sense because we're old. So this is the loophole and how God's going to pull this off. All of that ended up being bunk. And then now when they're a hell of a lot older, God's like, okay, well, you have 1 year. In 1 year, all of this stuff that we've been talking about will come to fruition. So prepare your old ass 100-year-old selves because this is all going down. And you are going to birth a child who rules kings. When he had finished talking to him, God went up from Abraham. Then Abraham took Ishmael, his son, and all of those born in the house or bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and he circumcised the flesh of their foreskins that very day to be in line with the covenant, as God had said to him. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, and Ishmael, his son, was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. That very day, Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised. Repetition. And all the men of his house, those born in the house and those bought with the money from a foreigner, were circumcised with him. Repetition, repetition, repetition. Significant, significant, significant. Tangent, read Hebrews 11:17 for a clue about Isaac and Ishmael. All right, let's do a side quest here for a second. All right, Hebrew 11:17. Oh, 17, all of it. Got it. All right, 17 was by faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promise was about to sacrifice his one and only son. Do you know what the Islamic side of that situation was, Ghost? Because I do not. I'd be very curious though to see to compare those stories. I'd be very curious. So if you know that, at least like drop me a hint or a link or something, and I would definitely read it after we're done. But yeah, great point. Great point. Chapter 18. And the Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre as he sat at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. This again, like the beginning of 17. The Lord appeared, the Lord appeared, the Lord appeared. Some, depending on how it's written, some depending on context, literal, not so literal. This, literal. And this is one that becomes wildly literal as the story begins to play out. The Lord appeared to him, again, by the oaks of Mamre as he sat at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. He lifted up his eyes and looked, literal, and behold, 3 men were standing in front of him. Super literal. Most places in the Bible, when the Lord appears, when Yahweh appears, when Yahweh is present, however it's written, it's so brief that it's very easy to talk it away. It's very easy to be like, he appeared in like a spiritual sense. This is not one of those times. This just gets deeper and deeper and deeper into Yahweh was literally there. And not just him. So 3 men were standing in front of him. There were 3 actual beings there. 3 embodied things that were there. One of them is obviously Yahweh. One of them is God. We'll get into that too at the end. Go ahead.
I have a question. So when it comes to different things like that, I'm a little confused when it talks about Adam and Eve and during that fall and how God was walking with them, but now he's not. So when you have these, physical manifestations of God, like, what's the difference? Why? And then did it stop only like when Jesus came on the scene? Like all the little theophanies, like the pillar of fire and the burning bush and all that stuff. You know what I mean?
So you mean like from the time that God, in a sense, like abandoned Adam and Eve, and then why he's doing it here? Oh,
right.
Okay.
Right. He's saying that he walked with God, right? Or they whatever, and then post fall, that wasn't like a thing anymore. So,
right.
I don't understand, because isn't this that or?
Yeah. No, majorly. In my opinion, majorly. Yeah. So it's like, this is completely just me. So do your own thing. But I have some weird beliefs. So the way I see it from like Genesis to when we get here is God was kind of like done, or at least needed a break, or whatever that means on his level. He was very disappointed and displeased, and that was very obvious. But then people started to come, and even in Genesis it says like Abram was righteous. He saw righteousness in him. You see it with several people, like Noah was another one. He was a man who was righteous. So I see it as like God sees these people who are worth his time, to say in like the dumbest possible way, but that gets the point across.
Yeah, I get it.
Right? So that's my 2 cents on it. Living with your dad versus being visited by your dad every now and then. That's a good point too. Yeah. That's a good point too. But I think it's more than that.
Yeah, honestly, when you first started, I was like, well, I'm a parent, so I'd get it. I wouldn't want to always.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think it satisfies it fully, but I think that's an important point that I did not think about. Graves, what's going on? Okay, so 3 men standing there. One of them is Yahweh, very obviously. When he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth and said, O Lord, my Lord, depending on translation, if you have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. I want to read this in reference to the O Lord. It could be that Abraham does not know he is speaking to Yahweh. This is from Logos, but this is unlikely, it says. The Hebrew verbs used in this verse are singular, indicating that Abraham addresses only one of the individuals, probably Yahweh. The same form of address occurs later in verse 27 when Abraham notes that he has spoken boldly with the Lord. In verse 4 through 5, the Hebrew verbs are plural, as Abraham includes the two figures in his invitation. I thought that was interesting because that is something to like take note of. That depending on where in context, it's Abraham is speaking directly to Yahweh most of the time. But there is a time where he addresses all three of them collectively as a group. Changes nothing, but if you're a weirdo, then it matters to you. If you have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought and wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree. Just quick note on this. Wash your feet. I feel like, oh crap. I feel like the washing of the feet thing, in my experience with Christian people, is that they think it was something like specific to the New Testament, which I don't understand, because it was like a common
It's so out of context.
It's also just like everybody in the world had dirty ass feet at the time. Everybody. So washing of the feet was like a wildly normal thing. The thing that was kind of different, but not really, because like this is a somewhat similar example, but in other cultures, they wash each other's feet as a sign of respect. But Jesus really brought that in super hard, which I get. So I get why they kind of land where they land, but it's something that was happening everywhere. Every possible culture was washing their feet because the dudes didn't have shoes for a very long time. And then they had these broke back ass little sandals and stuff. Like your feet are dirty, dude. They're very dirty. I was oversimplifying it for the sake of brevity. Gotcha. I mean, I didn't think of it from that context, though. I think it was a good point. If I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant, blah, 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 wash your feet. Well, I bring a morsel of bread that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant. So they said, do as you have said. And Abraham went quickly into the tent to Sarah and said, quick, 3 seahs of fine flour. Knead it and make cakes. He's giving them the best of the best. Some commentators will point this out as if that's not, like, doesn't make sense. I don't understand this. If he understands he's talking to Yahweh and understands that along with Yahweh, there are two, call them angels, whatever you want to call them. He's going to give them the best of the best that he has. I don't understand, but I've seen it in several commentaries where they make a big deal about him offering them the best bread. Like, yes, no shit. He's offering them the best bread. So he tells Sarah to make the best bread, basically. And Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to a young man who prepared it quickly. Then he took curds and milk and the calf that he had prepared and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree while they ate. This is just further indication that this is a literal thing that is happening. This is not one of those otherworldly situations. They said to him, where is Sarah, your wife? And he said, she is in the tent, indicating that she is not with them. That part is important. She's not there. She's close by, but she's not in their presence. The Lord said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, shall have a son. Pushing further this covenant. And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. The way of women had ceased to be with Sarah. This is menstruation, just to be clear. So she was no longer menstruating. So Sarah laughed to herself. First he laughed, now she's laughing. He laughed earlier, she's laughing now, saying, after I am worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure? There's been some argument about what she's talking about in context about the pleasure. For whatever reason,
Why is
I
that?
don't know. I don't know. It's something I don't understand. But there's one camp that believes she's not talking about sexual pleasure.
Yeah, okay.
And right.
So in Genesis, I'm trying to remember, does it mention that she's not menstruating? Because that is a big deal.
Right there.
So if you're not menstruating, you're not ovulating.
Yeah, no, right there.
Oh, my bad. We're in Genesis. Sorry. I thought we were in Adam and Eve. My bad.
Oh, yeah, no. This is the first mention. Is right here in 11.
Okay.
Okay, so she feels worn out. My Lord is old. Shall I have pleasure? I am of the great opinion that she's talking about sexual pleasure. I don't know where the argument is, but there is one. The Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?'" Just like picturing, Abraham is with the three fellows. Sarah is not. She is in another tent, out of sight. Obviously not out of earshot, but out of sight. And Yahweh hears her laugh and is like, "Why is she laughing? Why? What's her problem? Is anything too hard for the Lord?" Is his response. "At the appointed time, I will return to you about this time next year, and Sarah shall have a son." But Sarah denied it, saying, "I did not laugh, for she was afraid." He said, "No, but you did. You did laugh." Then the men set out from there, and they looked down toward Sodom. And Abraham went with them to set them on their way. The Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do?" This is an indication that he is talking to the others, not to Abraham. Otherwise, this makes no sense. So I'm going to read it again. The Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do?" What is he about to do? Sodom and Gomorrah. Catastrophe, right? Should I hide this from Abraham? "Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I have chosen him, that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord." This is all very strong language. The way of the Lord, or Yahweh's way, or the way of Yahweh, depending on which manuscript you're reading. "By doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has promised." It's super packed right there. Abraham was chosen by God. I have chosen him to be the one to bring in the way. The interesting thing is that this is what becomes the beginning of Christianity. Maybe it's happenstance, maybe it means absolutely nothing. Either way, to me, it's interesting. The way of the Lord or the way of Yahweh is not a super common thing in the Old Testament. It's got a couple of pop-up events. The way becomes Christianity. And then, for whatever stupid reason, we changed the name to Christian when it was the way. It's super significant. Abraham, what he has promised. Then the Lord said, "Because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and their sin is very grave, I will go down to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me, and if not, I will know." The outcry. This is from Logos 2. The Hebrew word used here, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah, is used elsewhere to describe oppression and injustice. They give examples out of Exodus. The crimes of Sodom are more than general evil of inhospitality and homosexual aggression described in Genesis 19. The first hint of Sodom's wickedness appeared back in 13:13 specifically, when it said, "Now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord." Again, that was out of Logos. So their sin is very grave. There's a very clear picture painted that this is not normal sin. I don't know how to say that properly. This is not your average. It's not the average pulling away from God's commands. Whatever is happening here is of a significant value or volume or both. Abraham intercedes for Sodom. This is where Abraham literally tries to go to bat and negotiate with God. So the men turned from there and went toward Sodom, but Abraham stood before the Lord. Then Abraham drew near and said, will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Are you going to kill everybody? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you then sweep away the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous who are in it? He's obviously questioning God in a respectful manner, I suppose, but he's doing it. He's also, in a sense, charging God, which is interesting. And then when you get to places like Job, there's very similar back and forths that happen. In Job, more so between Satan and God, but Job is also involved to some degree too. You see this sometimes. You don't see it like this often. It's a different level. It's a different interaction. So if there are 50, are you going to kill them all? It continues, far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous face as the wicked. He's charging God. It's an ethical argument between creator and creation. It's kind of a wild thing if you think about it.
Very bold.
Right, super ballsy. Far be that from you. And he's not only just doing it, it's the language too. Far be it from you, like almost as if he's saying, like, there's no way you'd be that savage of a God. There's no way you'd be that brutal. Several times, not just once, several times. He continues, far be that from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? So now Abraham is deciding to God what justice is, which is interesting on like a theological, ethical level, because we do that. Like people do that all the time. We have ideas and concepts of what ethical are. Go ahead.
Is he though? Because it almost sounds like he's just kind of like stating who God is, and I don't want to say reminding him.
Well, he's telling him what is just and what is not. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? After he, in two different places, tells him essentially that he shouldn't kill righteous people who haven't done anything wrong. He's saying it he's saying it relatively directly, actually, that he's being unjust. That doing that would be unjust. So not the judge of the earth do what is just after everything he just said. You don't think? I see it as a direct charge.
I mean, kind of. I get what you're saying, but I just feel like it's almost like, God, I know you better than that. Like, this doesn't make sense. I mean, we don't know the tone. We don't know any of that. But
Ghost actually said something that I really like about it. He said, the scene is a test of Abraham's morality. God wants him to question it.
That could be true, too.
I like the thought. Yeah. I'm so much more cynical than you guys, but I like the thought, and it could definitely be true. Yeah. Here at Chili's with my wife, daughter, and son-in-law having dinner, a quick hello to my beloved Theo. Well, we love you, dude. Enjoy Chili's. I don't think I've been to Chili's in like 20 years. At least.
Good. He's doing well. That's good.
Happy for you, dude. Get off your phone. Enjoy the time. Okay, so all the drama happens. We're on 27. Abraham answered and said, behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord, I who am but dust and ashes. So after all of that kind of bold questioning, he begins to kind of humble himself. And whether it's in response to a reaction or whether it's just a continuation of his thoughts and the way he's engaging with God, regardless, he said, behold, I've undertaken to speak to the Lord, I who am dust and ashes, I who am nothing. Suppose 5 of the 50 righteous are lacking. Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5? And he said, I will not destroy it if I find 45 there. Again, he spoke to him and said, suppose 40 are found there. He answered, for the sake of 40, I will not do it. Then he said, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Suppose 30 are found there. He answered, I will not do it if I find 30 there. He said, behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 are found there. He answered, for the sake of 20, I will not destroy it. Then he said, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak again, but this once. Suppose 10 are found there. He answered, for the sake of 10, I will not destroy it. And the Lord went his way. when he had finished speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. I am of the opinion, to a degree, that it's a lesson on morality. But I don't believe it's a clean lesson on morality. It's a very short, it's not as good as Job. Job is a very good lesson on morality, in my opinion, and on other things. This one's a bit rougher around the edges for me. But I get the viewpoint for sure. And I think it could definitely be true. It could definitely be totally true. And maybe it could be true to a point. I'm not sure. 99 bottles of beer on the wall. So he basically he negotiates it down to 10. Started high, negotiated down to 10. The whole time, theologically, like, God knows all of this, right? Like, that's the idea, is that God understands every possible outcome of this. God understands the full actual outcome after this is decided and the actual actions are taken. So it has to be a lesson, at least in a sense. What exactly the lesson is, how the lesson is to be used, like, those are the things that are to some degree arguable, I suppose. But nonetheless, go ahead. What did you say?
God, is that what you're saying?
I mean, you can definitely argue with God. I do this often.
Bargain.
Oh, bargain. See, I don't think you can. And I think that's where I do agree with Ghost, at least if I'm understanding him correctly. I don't think you can bargain with God. I think you have your free will and your choices, and I think God, the things that he's decided are already going to be done. But I think there's this middle ground that only lies with the actual people, with us, where we can make the choices. And I think God will amuse us, or that he'll be a part of the, not bargaining, but he'll be a part of the decision process of where and how you use your free will. I see that. This is different, though, because he is kind of bargaining, because the action has to be taken by God. The action isn't taken by Abraham. He's not telling Abraham, you have to go kill these people. And they're not arguing about, well, how many do I have to go kill? It's reversed. I believe one of the founding fathers used this scene to argue for protecting the innocent. I could see that. Like, the lesson that is there is clear, and it's a good ethical lesson. It just theologically, it becomes this big, wondrous thing. But I could definitely see that, and I think it's a good example. I didn't know that, though. I didn't know one of the founding fathers used it to argue protecting the innocent. But it's not an absolute protection, right? It's like, what is it? The rail car thing, the rail car scenario. What is that called? Where you have to choose who to kill. You either kill one person or 10 people.
The trolley problem.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you. It's been a long time since I've watched the Whatever podcast, which is where I heard about that more than anywhere else ever.
Is it?
It totally, yeah, absolutely was. It gives me vibes like that. Like, it's distinctly different than that, but it always makes me think of that. Because people are still gonna die. Like, there's no absolute outcome for the positive. Parents use rhetorical debate with their children all the time, right, so the children can arrive at a conclusion on their own, but the parent led them the whole time, right?
And then we have enough of it, and we're like, okay, you're not asking more questions, which is what God did. He's like, all right, and that's it.
Yeah, which is usually, at least in my experience as a dad, is like, I'll be done when you get where I intended you to go from the beginning. Once we have that back and forth and you whittle down to exactly like where I needed you to be anyways, yeah.
That's literally what I think is happening here.
Right.
It happens in other places in the Bible too.
It totally does. Yeah. Yeah, it totally does. It's not an uncommon thing. It seems to me, and maybe it's a bias thing for me, it just seems kind of colder than some of the other places, but maybe I need to review. Maybe this is a weird mental point for me that I get stuck on.
I think the other thing too, when it comes to parenting, is the dynamics change in the relationship as they get older and they mature. We trust them a little bit more with their way of thinking and decision making,
Yeah.
and we can have conversations like that. So it's possible that, like, obviously not everyone could talk to God like this, but they were at a place where,
Would you say when our kids get older, we can form a new covenant with them, new agreements?
to some degree, because unfortunately you can't be with them forever, so you have to kind of, I don't want to say, you have to trust that what you've taught them and what they've learned, they're going to practice, and you have to give them that chance and opportunity, which sucks, but
Do you
I
believe
guess
in
that's
completely letting them go at that point, or do you still feel like
well
you're involved?
unfortunately, the problem with like teenagers is they're literally practicing to be adults, right? And so there's only so much you can say or do. Like that whole my way or the highway thing doesn't work too much with teenagers. I know a lot of people who were like that, very authoritative, and guess what? Their kids don't talk to them anymore.
But
So
not
I
even
think
that.
this is the goal, to build so much trust with your children that they come to you voluntarily for advice their entire life.
Right. Like, I think there was the saying of the relationship should be something like, if you get in a car accident when you're a teenager, and it's like, oh shit, I was in a car accident, I have to call my dad, as opposed to, oh shit, I was in a car accident, like, I can't tell my dad,
Right.
Because
Right.
yeah,
And I think they're like two distinctly different things, but I like the what Ghost was saying about it kind of being a covenant. I agree with that. I kind of see it that way, that you have kind of a shift in covenant as the child grows, and as you freaking grow. Like, I've become a different parent than I was 5 years ago, and as the kids go through their phases and whatever, and thinking like me now, my mom's passed, but my dad was, I just saw him the other day, and I don't see him very often. I still like have this desire to impress him and to make him proud and to come across a certain way, and like I know what his expectations are and all of these things. So like, even at my age, I feel like there's kind of, in a sense, like a covenant there, and an expectation and requirements or things that I want to meet. Like, I have that desire.
Yeah, I agree.
For sure.
And I think it's probably there inherently based off of this and the relationship we should be having with God. Anyways, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That's an interesting way to look at it as a covenant. I haven't really sat and thought about that a whole lot.
Like, I hear you, but a lot of the times when I kind of push back, it's because I have the tendency to lean more of like looking at God like a parent, like, yeah, I get we get in trouble and we do the wrong thing, but like at the end of the day, you love your kid, like you're rooting for them. You don't want to, like, you hate disciplining them,
Yeah.
It's fun. I'm accountable. So you want to bargain with me? How about it?
Yeah, I don't see it as a bad thing. I'm saying people would.
Well, to some degree, because some kid,
I think like anything else for me, and I'm so annoying with this, is I think like the intention is what matters more than anything else. You can bargain with somebody with poor intentions, and it's very different than like if you have totally pure intentions and good intentions and positive intentions, then bargaining. I see it as like a totally different thing. So I'll bargain with God on certain things, but if you're bargaining for some selfish bullshit, I don't think there's a lot of grace for that, personally.
Well,
I think the process of bargaining teaches critical thinking.
Yeah, I agree. For sure. And that's kind of what it seems like. Like, this is a good example of that. This seems like this obnoxious almost back and forth of keep thinking, think about something else. Where are we going to land? When are you going to get it? It has that kind of flow to it. And like you said, there are several others. There are a number of others that are pretty similar, where it seems like God is just like, okay, figure it the fuck out. Like, you're getting there, but get all the way there.
I think the other thing that's really important that isn't really discussed, but the tone is definitely there throughout, is the relationship. Like, you have to have that relationship. Like, the fact that he felt comfortable enough to even do the bargaining, or God knows him enough to trust to some degree what he's doing in this conversation. Like I said, you know your kid. Like I had one kid where they said they were sick and wanted to get out. Like, okay, they were always trying to get out of stuff, so you're going to school. But one kid who had to go to school all the time and they were sick, like, okay, you don't go to school type thing.
Yeah, right. And then the part that gets me about that I have a hard time with is like, as a parent in the world, you don't know everything. But from the context of God, supposedly that's different, right? Like he already knows all of that. So I get stuck in my head a lot thinking about that. Like the actual function of the relationship is different, because as a parent, we don't always know when they're lying to us. We don't know when they're full of shit. You can have a pretty good idea a lot of the time for sure, but you don't absolutely know definitively everything. The idea that God definitively knows absolutely everything, it amuses me. It's like, think about that, because he has absolute knowledge while he's going through similar types of back and forth relationships. It's kind of amusing to think about.
But I think it tests the character, right? So
For sure.
sometimes I'll find evidence of stuff, right? And then like I don't tell them I found evidence of stuff, but I know, and I'm like giving them an opportunity, like, okay, do you have anything to say on this topic? Are you sure? And it's like, okay, you came clean. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it's it's a big deal for sure. My favorite thing with this though, the last section 22, the whole last part, the bargaining, is if you read 22 through 26, it seems very emotional. There's an exclamation. It seems as if Abraham is not panicking, but he's heightened emotionally.
Good.
Right, but then when you read 27, it seems like he has this thought of like, oh shit, I'm talking to God like this. Who am I? I'm nothing. I'm dust. I'm ashes. That's the first time he says that. After kind of emotionally outcrying at God. And then starting in 28, it becomes this really structured, how about this? How about that? How about this? How about that? And then a conclusion is met. So like the emotional arc of it, I really like, because it reminds me of a lot of time like reading Paul and other parts of the New Testament where you see this heightened emotion very obviously. And then sometimes you can even read them being like, oh shit.
Right.
That's right. I need to get my shit together and like calm down. It's always just really interesting to me.
Yeah. And David,
Yeah, David, that's another great example. Yeah, David, for sure. Super emotional guy.
Yeah.
Highly emotional guy. All right. Well, I've got nothing else unless you guys do. Thursday, Adam and Eve. We'll keep going. And then we're gonna do second Adam and Eve. And then if nobody's against it, I'm down to just keep doing the Apocrypha on Thursday, because I'm having a great time.
Yeah.
It's been a joy. So I'm
down
very much
for that.
open for it. Graves says yes too. All right, then we'll do that. I'm going to assume most everybody will be down for it. It's been really good. So then after a second Adam and Eve, then we'll do a poll for, I'll pick randomly like 5. And we can pick.
Book?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're all good though. Some are super short too, so some of them will burn through relatively quickly.
Did you ever do that research on like the Book of Giants?
Yeah, I did actually. I found a little bit, and I'm down to read it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If nothing else, like I said the other day, I think it'd be interesting either way.
Yeah.
And if there's anything else like that, I don't want to be like so stern about, they're not. Let's just fucking read anything. If it's interesting, it's interesting. I feel like nobody is really here that I'd worry about them. Like, I think that my mentality has been like more as like just in a different place around different people, and I don't think it's something I need to be concerned about here.
Right. Walk on eggshells. Well,
Right.
I think the other thing too, like when it came to the Book of Giants, is there was enough in there where, like I said, it was lining up a lot with Enoch, so it wasn't some willy-nilly, BS type stuff completely. So
Yeah, then even more so. Yeah, but I did look. I don't know why we wouldn't. It seems pretty legit.
We only have pieces of it too. That's the other part that sucks.
One of these days, we got to do some episodes on like Rosicrucianism or something. I think it's really important.
We could do that.
I mean, one of these, maybe next year. Like, I don't know.
Are there any are there
So
any
many
like
books to read.
specific sources you want to use, or just in
So
general?
fun.
Yeah, like there's a book called The Rosicrucian Cosmoconception by Max Heimdall. There's a lot of stuff from Rudolf Steiner.
All right, I found Max Heimdall's. Yeah, I'd definitely be down for sure. Yeah, yeah, I could get something like this on Kindle, and then I can do the Kindle browser thing, and we can read it like that.
Yeah, I think it'd be kind of nice.
Yeah,
But
no,
you know, it's whatever. I almost like want to do a vote just to see what people think. I don't want to just shove it in there.
I think I would guess most people don't know what it is, so you might have to do a little explanation.
Oh, that's actually true. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, that would be my guess, and maybe I'm underestimating, but if you put together like a summary explaining like in normal terms so people can understand, then we can make a poll based off that.
Normal terms, not ghost terms. Normal.
Well, no, I meant like talking terms, like
I'll
not
try to talk. Yeah. It's basically just a lens to understand Christianity through. So it's not its own new thing. It's just a different lens, I think.
it's a
Kind of like,
perspective.
I guess, Gnosticism, but
Yeah, I think it'd be great. Yeah, I'd be absolutely for it, for sure. Yeah, no,
One last.
go ahead.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Just on my end. Do we know if there's any books like in the Quran that were left out that maybe you know what I
yes, but they burned them all.
mean?
No, like for real, they burned them all.
Yeah,
No, I know. Oh, I know. There was a lot. Yeah, I won't get into that part, but yeah. I'm aware.
Christians did it too, unfortunately.
No,
Oh,
that's-
no doubt. But a lot of Christian stuff is left over. We don't have any Islam stuff left over,
Oh yeah, no,
except for what we have.
totally
But
different.
once upon a time, were the two even together? Any of the books is basically what I'm kind of wondering.
Yeah,
Yeah, they were,
Yeah.
and then they burned those versions.
yeah. So they were all together, like originally. What
Yeah.
the Jews called the Torah, like very, very, very early on, and Ghost can correct me if I'm off on any of that, but it was all the same, at least in the beginning. And then you had these factions break off, and then the factions adjusted and redacted and added, and then they became separate things. Like a simplified view of it.
Yeah, it's like a tree trunk, and then you have branches that come off of it, and you have branches that come off of branches.
Right.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to see if there was any limbs that were at least related.
Yeah, for sure.
Nobody follows the trunk religion, like the base religion. Everything is a branch off of that objective truth that no one has.
Yes.
Man.
The trunk is impossible, in my opinion. I think it's impossible.
But today, yeah.
I think it's gone. I think you can find fragments of it, but the thing that gets me is that I don't think we have even like a 16th or we have almost nothing compared to what the actual trunk was.
Really? That
like,
many?
I did personally, yeah. I think like what Ghost said, and maybe I'm more extreme about it, but I think absolutely everybody is functioning off of these tiny little branches, off of bigger branches, off of bigger branches, off of bigger branches, off of the trunk. I don't even think we have a big ass branch. We have these.
I think
tiny
the trunk
little
is what they
branches.
taught in Eden.
Yeah, I agree.
Pre-flood.
I agree.
I know that there was a reference. I think it's called Q, because I know a lot of this was done. Whatchamacallit? Orally.
Yeah.
Passed down through generation and generation. So there's a lot of things that just weren't written down. So I don't know that. Yeah, who really knows?
That's why we'll never know the trunk, because it wasn't written down.
Right.
That's so sad. Let's storm the Vatican.
Yeah, they just got hidden branches. That's all.
Right. Exactly. That's why I became very pessimistic as a Christian years ago, is because I had the realization of you're fucked. If you actually want to understand truly and trust something truly, just give up. There's absolutely no use because we're so far removed from the origin, the reality. There is 0% chance that you'll ever have even to me, in my head, 20% picture of the actual origins of everything. I just think we're too far removed. Everything being word of mouth. And then you get all the assholes who altered what we did have. So by the time you get to like the shit that's in our hand, I'm swearing a lot, I'm sorry. By the time we get to the stuff that we're actually holding, it's like, is it even worth reading, really? And it is. It is. But it feels like that sometimes. Because even by the time of Christ, things had it was all word of mouth already. Like, you don't think any of that got changed? You're crazy. The inerrancy of the Bible, the big modern Christian thing, well, not modern, but the big Christian thing of like, it's absolutely perfect. Get the fuck out of here, dude. Come on. Very childish.
Actually don't think we need to have any like concrete books or manuscripts about this quote unquote trunk religion, because I think God's creation is the testifying power of the truth. So like when you compare every science and like add them together and see the picture they create, the more you study, the more the mosaic becomes more clear. Because books do change, languages change, all that changes, but like atoms don't change. The way the laws of nature work don't change. So that's the real place to look for the objective, like trunk religion. And that's where I look. I don't really care. I mean, I like looking at ancient manuscripts and stuff and all that, but it's the stuff that doesn't change is that I'm interested in.
I think for me, the part that is just upsetting, and I think about like in the back of my mind through all this, is like the fact that I'm sick, and Jesus says, like talks about all the sick being healed and all the people who are demonized set free. And it's like, well, how is that done? Was that done? Was that written? Is there some formula that's out there somewhere, and how deprived are we today because of those decisions that were made? That's kind of my mindset in all of it.
The lack of answers is hard, yeah. With something like that, for sure. That's understandable. But it's a very positive picture that Ghost is kind of painting. Outside of like personal plight on a greater level, is like that is the people are the origin. Like the people, like I said, it's the constant that's never changed, where everything else changes, including what people say, but the people themselves, and whatever word you want to use, the spirit, the soul, whatever, is different. And everybody became so hyper focused on the text and less even more so like over God, in my opinion, is I think religions became so obsessed and obsessive over texts and less over God. So like people had a better relationship with the book than they did with God. And it caused a great divide, in my opinion, between creator and creation. And then it became all about the text. And I've been super guilty of it for a very long time to varying degrees, because I became very obsessed about the text. But for the most part, I've been able to like keep my personal it's always been very important to me. But you see the difference, in my opinion, between people who are hyper focused on trying to figure something out, which has been me in many phases, or people who are hyper focused on trying to understand, which doesn't require like proof in all scenarios, but trying to understand creation and people.
That's fair, right? Because even in the New Testament, he does talk about like, I did send my Holy Spirit, whatnot.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's complicated. It's all very complicated. But I guess that's why we do this. Or try. All right.
I appreciate the...
Yeah, it's it's tough stuff, man. It's not easy stuff.
It's important. We need to seek. Like, God wants seekers. He doesn't want people who think they just are omniscient, because that's blasphemy. So,
yeah,
I mean, it makes sense when you look at it like that.
Yeah, it takes a certain amount of humility to be like, hey, I don't have this shit together. What do I do? What am I supposed to do?
Yes.
The act of seeking is more important,
I think so.
to God.
Yeah. It solidifies the relationship for sure.
think that's the thing that the church lacks, which is why I feel very good about what all of us do. I think personally and also together.
What part?
The ability to sit here and be like, I don't know. I'm
For
not sure.
sure.
You can't do that in a church. If you tell
No.
someone, a pastor will not say, I don't know. It just doesn't happen. On certain things they will, but there will be a million things that we sit here in the middle of while reading being like, don't know. Don't know. This is what's taught, but I don't know. It doesn't quite make as much sense as it should. Or like Ghost did the other week, we're like, hey, that's not in the Bible. You don't get that in church, and that's why I just really appreciate what we do here because of stuff like that.
Someday we're going to talk about narcigesis, because when it comes to those types of people and character, they just don't like to admit that they make mistakes or that they don't know anything. So there's a whole nother beast that needs to get discussed in that.
Yeah, it's on the list still. I see it every time I look at that list. I think it's a huge part of it. I think
It really is.
But I think a huge part of it too is just ignorance. The pastors I knew were just ignorant.
But that's also pride, right? That goes with the whole narcissism. You don't want to admit that you don't know. Like,
no, but different. So I get what you're saying, and I agree. But the guys that I knew were ignorant in the sense that they had been educated by people who did suffer from that and thought they knew everything. So then these pastors who were, for the most part, like good guys and wanted to like preach the truth and really believed in what they were doing and what they were saying, but because their source of truth they trusted, they had no reason to be prideful. They thought it was the truth. I believe that about many of the guys. Other pastors, you guys know, I have no problem saying they're absolute pieces of shit. But I know a bunch of guys who I believe truly with my heart that they honestly believed what they had was the truth. And I don't believe they were prideful men at all. I think they were just ignorant. But I think there are many who are prideful on top of it.
Right. But that's what I'm trying to say is, like, at some point there needs to be some level of like acknowledgement where it's like you also have to look at your fruit, right? Like if someone is questioning you and asking you, why did I have 7 miscarriages? Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
You know?
I just think we've created a very difficult system to function in. It's the religious system, like all of them, but Christianity specifically, it's a treacherous place to try to navigate anymore as like somebody who just wants to think. If you're down to not think, it's a very smooth community to be a part of or to lead, to be a pastor. But I was so uncomfortable all the time in school, in the church, just so uncomfortable because I knew I was not allowed to fucking say anything that I wanted to say, and I was not allowed to ask any of the things I wanted to ask, and it tore me apart. It made me think for a very long time I didn't believe in God because I was like, there's no way this is what this is. This is not what I experienced.
You're demonized, or you have faith if you're questioning or trying to understand.
Right.
Yeah. So
and it's just not the culture. Like it was all of it. It was just absolutely everything. So I genuinely thought, I'm like, I guess I am an atheist because that's where I came from. I'm like, maybe I just deluded myself into thinking the shit was real. It's not real. All of these people are crazy. They're all deluded. Nobody wants to think about anything. I like had a crisis for a period of time.
Yeah, I get it.
But yeah, so it's a beautiful thing to see is all. And I hope that something happens and the world is lit on fire metaphorically. And people start to do more or think more or wonder more. I think a lot could change. But I'm the cynic, so I just don't think that it will.
Don't worry, Joe. We're there.
Oh, I know.
And I'm an asshole. So I would say things in school like, well, what about this part? And
it's good. It's a good thing. As a teacher, I'd be so fucking bored if people didn't ask questions. That would be the worst job ever. To not have people who are inquisitive. Like, why? When kids ask questions, I love it.
Yeah.
It's the best.
Well, like there was, I remember like one professor, and they were talking about the legalities of the church and how, like I lost my shit and I started cussing, and I thought I was going to get kicked out for sure, but it was talking about like if a 14-year-old comes up to you and says, you know, they're pregnant and the father is not the same age, and how you legally can't say.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, we weren't taught that. So I think that's largely like denominational. Like I've heard of that
Well,
happening in Catholic churches too.
I mean, there's so many other versions. There's so many other things where it's like, oh, you know, you have to be a safe person and not disclose. I'm like, are you fucking shitting me? We'll see. There I go. But like, your obligation is to the flock. You're not shepherding the flock. You're not fucking protecting them. That's your God-given, you
Right.
know,
Right. Yeah,
fuck
it's just
the law at that
what,
point.
what I always, because there's a lot of things like that. I guess like that's a very severe version of it. But even smaller versions of it, less severe versions of it. I had issues with some of the churches that I worked with because I'd ask them like, where does this come from? I hear you. I don't agree with you, but I hear you. Where did you derive this from? Show me, because it should be from the Bible. If it's inerrant and supplies
Right.
you all answers for all things at all times, fine, show me. And it caused a lot of contention because a lot of that shit is just made up. And then they'll try to twist and tie and do their gymnastics to connect it to something, and it's inferior. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I get it. And then people don't think for themselves, and they don't like. It's like, yeah, the evidence is right in front of you. Like,
Right.
you got to call a spade a spade.
It's cultural
Sure.
decay. Cultural decay. The culture of Christianity has dramatically decayed.
Yeah.
Any religion that abhors questioning is a false religion. That's one metric to know objectively. Yes.
Or isn't strong enough to withhold.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's false, because it's not strong enough. Like if it can't withstand scrutiny, then it's fake.
Yeah.
Massive red flag. Massive red flag if you're not allowed to ask questions. Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Maybe.
yo. I'm gonna get some time with Kat before the week. Good talk though. I miss this. I'll tell you that. I do. My schedule should be chilling out, so I've said it over the past couple weeks, but I am trying to figure out another day to just slip this in, for frequency's sake, and just see how it goes. So I'll let you guys know about all that. But Thursday, maybe that's when we go into a book, like this Max what is it, Heindel book? Maybe we get into Heindel. So maybe we'll get into something like that if I can throw a third day in and just spread the literature love. I think it'd be cool. So I'll see what happens and I'll let y'all know. But Thursday we'll do Adam and Eve again. Having a great time.
Sounds good.
All right, guys. I love you. Everybody have a good night.
Take it easy.